Dear colleagues, dear participants, welcome to the very first workshop in a series of 7 we are going to organize in online edition this time. The essence of success lies in the cooperation of all those involved in the process. I'm therefore honored to announce that we have teamed up with the Ljubljana University Incubator and the EIT Health this year, as we all share a common belief that we are even stronger and strive to network, empower, and efficiently develop the healthcare ecosystem. I give the floor now to Jakub Gajšek, the director of Ljubljana University Incubator, which is also the EIT Health Regional Info Point in Slovenia. Please, Jakub.
Hello, everybody, and I'm sorry for not having the camera on. I had a bit of a technical issue earlier today. However, thank you very much, Mojca, for the kind introduction. As the director of the incubator and the head of EIT Health for Slovenia, I welcome you all. This is a fantastic collaboration, and today the topic is incredibly important because navigating the healthcare market absolutely is very difficult. And therefore, yes, these topics that we will be covering through these workshops have been chosen in collaboration with the community, with hearing what they are looking to learn. And I believe that there will be quite a lot of fantastic content today and in the future. And if you have any feedback for us or for Health Day, we are all very open to listening to feedback and to improving the format in the future. Yes, I will give the mic back to Mojca. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakub. And before we start, I would like to give a mic also to Gregor, my co-lead of Health Day and also administrator today, to give you some directions how we will navigate through the seminar, and then we will start.
I would just like to give you a fantastic piece of news that we received yesterday night, so really late in the evening. You know that the goal of Health Day community, and this is somehow, I hope, the goal of us all, is to speed up the pace of innovation and the adoption of innovation into our healthcare system. And yesterday, one of our companies who was in the first DIH generation, Savi, informed us that they were admitted with their ECG measuring device into the official basically price list of Zdravstvena zavarovalnica, so Zavod za zdravstveno zavarovanje Slovenije. And we are really grateful that we do have progress there. So this is one of the 3 solutions that we now count. It might be that we are wrong at that, but you know that our goal was 5 digital healthcare solutions until the end of this year. And it seems to me that Corona was very accelerating moment for the digital health, as we also see in all these tele-webinars and tele-solutions. That's it from me from now on. I am administering the call, but you are in the hands of Mojca. I'm sure it will be great. Thank you.
So then it's time to start. Innovation should impact on triple aim of healthcare, improving patient experience, cost measures, and overall health. But now agile startup can navigate within the regulatory frame for cutting-edge medical approaches and digital technologies, and even in a predominantly public healthcare system. How to do that? Mateja Urlep, we call her also a mother of biosimilars, and she was behind the Lake plant in Menges in past decades. So she's also a president of Health Day think tank, and I'm inviting her now to give us an insight into the roadmap for the integration of digital innovation in the Slovenian health system. She also written for us, for our community. Please, Mateja.
Okay, thank you for welcoming me into this community via digital now, and I will now start sharing my screen. Hope it works.
It works perfectly, Matea.
Yeah, just trying to get into presentation mode. Okay, so I think here we are. Obviously, I will just give you a brief introduction into the path of innovation into the healthcare market, into the healthcare systems. But before we go there, is it okay or not? Before we go that, I would like to just give you an insight into where the trends in the healthcare industry are going. We have also heard lately that, there are, discussions about gene and cell therapy, very personalized approaches to treating some of the very rare diseases. And if we look back, in the 80s, we had this mass blockbuster drugs on the market. They are still there, treating, let's say, very huge populations of patients. So it's one size fits all approach. And since those products, those drugs, those tablets, let's put it this way, were fairly cheap, even though they were not perfectly fit for each and every patient, they were good enough for the whole healthcare system. Obviously, as we moved forward and the science has, become, let's say, more, has given us more insights into what the mechanisms of action on the cellular and molecular level are, we have become, let's say, I hear a lot of noise. We got to the specialty care where we were treating, let's say, smaller populations of patients, but very targeted. So that's a selective population with targeted medicines, and here specifically biological products such as monoclonal antibodies and cytokines, which are very expensive to produce, and we have to give them parenterally, so through injections into our bloodstream or under the skin. These are extremely expensive to produce, and the cost of those drugs is really, really much higher, 10 to 100 to 1,000 times higher than tablets. And here, obviously, they have to be selective enough and much more efficient when treating the patients. Now, the next level is personalized, and personalized healthcare does not mean only a product, a drug, but also the full approach. And here in this personalized, digital is so important because we have to be able to track and trace and follow patients, through how they are responding to their therapy. Is it best selected for them? And we have to be able to also look into the real world data. And to do that, we can't do that without digital. And as Gregor has already mentioned, now the Corona crisis has definitely catalyzed, the approaches to get more digital into the full healthcare system, be it telemedicine, so that you can monitor patients when they are at home, but they are still connected to their physicians, so that we basically disrupt the current model where the patients had to get to their physicians or into the hospital to be treated. Now, obviously, we are trying to get to a place where patients can be monitored and treated whilst they are still at home. So this is really catalyzing, and I think it's really important that we now think about how the whole healthcare system is going to change because of this, new, let's say, situation we are in, where we have to also take care of the social distancing. I hear some voices. Is it okay? Please give me feedback. So in terms of, how innovation and how new approaches to treatments get into the system, healthcare system, I would just want to point out that the healthcare system is really extremely regulated, because obviously we have patients who are usually naive in terms of, or laymen in terms of the medical knowledge. And on the left-hand side, we've got the medical community, which has, basically gone through an educational system, and by the diploma they've got, they have proven that they can treat the patient. So they've got a license to do what they do. And on the right-hand side, we've got all the players in this industry who are providing solutions or products to treat the patients, or to help healthcare professionals to treat the patients. And that's the pharmaceutical industry, the medical device industry, and now the industry of the digital apps, which all has to go through the regulatory process to prove that their product solutions actually do what they're intended to do. So there is a very regulated system. And as we know, Slovenia has got a Bismarck system, which is where the healthcare is available to a lot of people, and the state is paying for this system through our participation into the budget. And we've got the payer who definitely, together with the medical, let's say, community, decides what is available to patients in Slovenia through the, let's say, through the healthcare system. In addition, obviously, there are also solutions and devices that could be available directly to the patients through our out-of-pocket payments. However, everything is regulated through the regulatory agencies. It's the JAZMP in Slovenia and the SIQ as the notified body to also basically approve and CE mark the devices. If we think about how to introduce our innovation into the healthcare market, obviously there are a lot of stakeholders that we need to meet their needs. One thing is our idea on the left-hand side, and then obviously we have to validate this idea through the medical community or healthcare professionals who are our, let's say, judges in terms of whether our solution definitely means something which will improve patient outcomes. On one side, we have to go through the regulatory process to get our idea verified. And on the other hand, we also have to make sure that the payer will definitely pay for our innovation once we introduce it into the healthcare system. On the right-hand side, you can see this magic triangle, the Trinity, the patient who's the layman, and in the name of the patient, the healthcare professional decides what's the best solution for their medical need, and the payer pays for that solution. And if we just go here, definitely in looking into this Trinity, we have to make sure that we meet the needs of each of those stakeholders. In addition to that, there are some solutions or devices that could be out of pocket for the patient. In that case, the patient and the payer become one. So we have some of the situations where we offer our innovation into the healthcare system, but we decide that it's best that the patient pays directly out of their pocket. So there is also a combination where the patient at the same time is also the payer. And we don't have the, let's say, national payer or the hospital in this mix. But it's, depending on the solution and on the product we want to bring into the healthcare system, we can decide to do that. We've been discussing all the time now that, because patients are laymen, so they don't have the medical education. Usually they look at the medical, let's say, community, all the healthcare professionals, be it physicians, be it nurses, whoever is the best suited to give them advice. So basically, what we definitely need to do when we develop our solution for the healthcare system is to validate this through the bodies that will be suggesting our patients what to do. And, here the general, let's say, community is one thing we have to be able to address. The other thing is the associations of patients. Patient associations are very important because sometimes, you know, if we don't want to go through the whole system into the payer and we address directly the patient, this is way to go to get the advice to the patients. The other level is definitely the general practitioners and pharmacists as well. You know, all the healthcare professionals and nurses that could advise to your patients, you know, what to choose. Then we've got the specialists, and on the top of the top, when we really, let's say, make tectonic changes into the, let's say, standard of treatment, we need key opinion leaders and medical associations and, let's say, medical teams that are in our country giving the guidelines how to treat some diseases to have their buy-in as well. So there's the pyramid of the influencers in every community on the, let's say, medical approaches. Now, just to give you an insight, if you decide to put a medical device, be it, you know, something which is a physical or an app, it could be also an app on your computer or on your phone. There is a pathway which definitely includes medical community, it includes regulators, and it includes, let's say, a dance where you go through your pilot to your final clinical evaluation and then to the registration of that device, be it, you know, physical device or an app, to get the approval and to get the, let's say, license to market it in the certain market. And last but not least, definitely once you have the, let's say, medical nod that this is really important, that this is really something that will change the medical approach, you need to start to talk to the payer, right? You need to see whether the payer and how the payer can include your innovation into their system. So that's why the payer should be included already into the pilot, so that you design your pilots in a way that you get the information back where you can claim that you have also, you know, economical benefit of using your innovation in the healthcare, let's say, practice. As you have been, perhaps, if we just look into the medical device regulation, you have obviously been informed that now, because of the coronavirus crisis, pandemics, there is a change in terms of when the mandatory use of the new regulation in Europe is mandatory. So it's not from 26th of May this year, but next year. So it's been all postponed for 1 year. Any questions?
Well, Matea, thank you. If there is no questions at this point, I have prepared some, but we will discuss it later during the discussion part at the end of our webinar. But now ahead of us is another great presentation. I'm pleased to announce 2 experts who will share lessons they've learned in their professional careers and guide us through the maze of regulatory framework from which to find a way before medical devices actually brought to the market. Igor Rogel and Diego Casadei, they both work for COSILAB Aerofast Medical Device Engineering, which supports scaling companies and startups to meet the challenges of bringing medical device to the healthcare market. Guys, please welcome. The floor is yours, and I'm looking forward to hear what you have prepared for us.
Thank you, Moitza, for this great introduction. Let me try to share the screen first so that I bring my presentation on. Just a moment. I hope you can see it now. Okay, also would like to thank Matea for a great first introduction to the innovation in the healthcare market, it's a great basis for where I would like to take my presentation from and continue in a more specific region, that is medical devices, and how we see they are sold into the healthcare market. We're going to be talking more or less from very much our experience of working with startups and medical companies who develop medical devices. So I will assume that everyone hears me well. So let's just have a look at what is the agenda. As I said, the topic for today is specifically medical devices that are developed and sold into the healthcare market. So I would like to put it first into the context of the medical industry. Then I will look at what really is the game for a medical device developer or somebody who wants to sell it to the healthcare market. I would like to see who are the innovators and how they bring those innovations to market more specifically. Diego will then look into the phases, more specifically the phases of development and how the devices are then commercialized. He will also maybe share some views of how we at Arrowfast work with our clients to achieve those goals. At the end, I will try to summarize it in looking at what really takes for a medical device manufacturer to play this game, what skills he requires to be competent and to win in this industry. So first, let's put this into the context. What medical industry is pretty complex industry with a variety of different sections or subsections. So for today, we want to focus on medical devices that are sold to the healthcare market. But what we are not going to be talking about is, let's say, medicines or that are developed in pharma or biopharma sectors. And we're not going to be talking about technology that is sold into life science industry. So I think it's important just to give that, to set those boundaries. Let's have a look at maybe one chart just to paint the picture of what really is the healthcare market and the segments into which we sell medical devices. Here the bubbles represent the size of those market segments, and maybe just to point out to the bigger ones, diagnostics is the big segment where medical devices are used. Diagnostic imaging, similarly so. In this segment, devices are pretty large and complex. Then we have cardiology and surgery, endoscopy. These are segments where, let's say, implants or surgical devices are sold, a bit less complex devices, I'd say. So let's move on into maybe just to explain the range of devices that are sold in the healthcare market, and they range from very complex, as I mentioned before, radiosurgery or an imaging device is a pretty complex 5 million or so device, and on the other hand, we can have very small wearables that are tiny, but yet could be complex devices. We also distinguish devices from active and passive devices. Active devices are the ones that are power-driven or software-controlled. And on the other hand, we have implants that are passive devices. They are such as, let's say, hip replacement. However, all of these will fall into they will be regulated under the same regulatory regimes. Of course, the regulatory framework for them may be different depending on the type of risk or the classifications within they fall under. But generally, the steps for their development and commercialization in particular are pretty much the same. So this is really the focus of today's presentation. So what really is the game for a medical device manufacturer, developer? We observe that startups and SMEs are the innovators in the medtech industry. That's kind of natural. They're small and nimble companies, focused, and they develop their devices and bring them to market within a scale of 3 to 10 years, for example. They prove their clinical benefits, they prove their value, usually within a top tier clinics. These are clinics that are usually connected to university and research focused. And then they try to exploit the market on a wider scale. They try to enter the general hospital market. This is usually a lot more difficult for smaller companies, startups. And at that stage, it is very common that large corporations, large medical corporations will come to play. The large corporations are not really set up for driving the innovation. I'm not suggesting they're not innovative, but they usually see this 3 to 10 year development plan as too risky, too costly, and it doesn't really fit within their processes. So large corporations find it much more effective to purchase medical device companies and utilize their innovation, their new products within their distribution channels and scale this product in the general hospital market. So this is a pretty common approach, a pretty common game in this field. If somebody wants to learn more about it, there's a great podcast by Duke Rowland that you can find on the internet, and below there is a link to it that talks further about this, about how this innovation in the healthcare market works. Now, where do we fit in this game? We, as Aerofast or Cosilab, we are an engineering companies, and startups usually are small companies with relatively limited skill base. They would approach us to fill their gaps in engineering capability. They would approach us to develop the technology, not only to find the right skills and put the right development team together, but more so to get a team that is not only a technical team of engineers, they are a team that has done medical devices before, a team that already works within regulatory frameworks, who understand the framework and understand how to produce not only the technology, but actually a stack of documentation that comes with that device as it will be certified. So at that point, I would like to maybe pass you on to Diego, who can look into the phases of development in a little bit more detail and explain how we cooperate with our clients to help them innovate and develop new medical devices. Please, Diego.
Thanks a lot, Igor. So we have discussed, how to help startups in particular to get from idea to, a certified product that they can sell. And, by thinking internally, we came up with a number of questions that we have to clarify, we have to address. And this is based on our experience in COSILAB. And it's also at the basis of the Aerofast initiative, right? Because we want to make treasure of all of these experiences. I'm not going to go through all questions. We will also give you the slides later. Let me just tell you which categories of questions we have to address. Of course, let's start with business, okay? If you want to have your product in general use, this has to be sustained by some business model, okay? And of course, this business model has to involve the full roadmap from how you develop and demonstrate the idea to how you get the first customers, how you scale up in getting additional market, and so on. So this is the very first step you have to do, even to attract investors. So it's obvious, right? And in addition to that, you need also to have a clear idea who is your buyer, your user, and all other stakeholders. So I think Mattia made a beautiful presentation of the complexity of and the variety of players that are on the market and on the different markets. So in most European countries, payers are taxpayers. In some country and in US, for example, health is paid by the patients themselves. Okay, so that has to be put into the big picture, and this is part of the questions that we have to address. And of course, once you have an idea of the business model, of who are the stakeholders, how you want to address them, you have to understand and clarify and convince others that you can develop the electronics, the mechanics, the chemistry, and all the technology that is supporting your medical idea, right? And that involves a number of expertises that are a necessity in this kind of development. And so they include from the R&D process to the product management at the very end, and you have to keep that into account. And of course, the other key point that Mattia already emphasized is that in addition to all the questions that maybe Igor in the meanwhile you can show also the next page, you have to account for the complexity of regulations. And let me say one thing, and that was explained very well by Mattia. Okay, the thing is, when we talk about healthcare, the number and variety of stakeholders is so large that you cannot pretend everybody to know everything, okay? And so regulations are there to minimize the risk of damage. And so they are a necessity. And because of the variety of treatments, approaches, and patients and stakeholders, this regulation, which is a necessity, as I said, is also quite, generous in describing all possible cases. So at the end, it becomes a task by itself to just understand which is the regulatory framework that is applicable to your case, and then how to move and distribute yourself among all these rules. As a matter of fact, for many startups, this may be a showstopper, okay? And the thing is, just to follow up the laws that are described by, or are, let's say, summarized by these corpus of documentation, it takes a dedicated team. So it's a big investment. In addition, you want to be certified, and you need to get used to all the procedures, and you will find yourself spending significant time in doing that, okay? I don't consider that overhead. It's essential because, as I said, regulations are needed to protect ourselves, okay? But in the end, when you have research or R&D activity in a research environment, you are typically following very lightweight procedures, and you end up with you did 50% of the work to do your own research and testing, and then the other half of the time you spent in validating it and proving that you are successful. As soon as you start working in a regulated environment, you multiply by 2 or 3 or 4 the time you need, just because you need to write a lot of documentation and because you have to prepare for doing that in advance. So maybe we go to the next slide now, and you know, what boils up when you look at all of these regulations is essentially summarizing 2 very important questions. Okay, the first question is about validation, and is, am I designing the right product? Okay, and you'd better to address this question at the very beginning, because this is where you validate your understanding of the problem and your understanding of the proposed solution. And this validation comes not only from you, of course, it has to come from all the stakeholders, at least the most important ones. And you have to do that at the very beginning and continuously in the course of development. But then once you believe that you have the right idea, right, then you ask yourself, okay, how can I design my solution in the right way? Okay, and so this is also prescribed by, you know, for example, this verification and validation, or VV model, or simply just V model, right? You have to do a lot of requirements engineering. You have to collect documentation at the very beginning, and then you establish how you want to verify each of them. You have to provide full traceability of all requirements, and this is, you know, really taking maybe the majority of your time. So let's see on the next page how we could try to distribute the complexity among the different phases of a natural roadmap from an idea to a final product. Okay. Usually at the very beginning, what we call here phase 0, you have an idea, you want to cross-check with your colleagues, some environment, maybe some hospital, doctors, that your idea makes sense, and you proceed quite fast in a lightweight way. You do a lot of attempts, and this is quite interesting and amusing, and I've been in research myself for 20 years, so I like this phase a lot. Okay. Usually the risk of failing here is so high, and you know, you proceed by attempts and trial and errors essentially. And so this is where public funds play the biggest role. Okay. As soon as you believe you have a proof of concept, okay, something that clearly shows that you got it, okay, then what you have to do, well, you want to consider moving from the proof of concept to a final product. And that is when you start actually following the regulation. You have to start at that stage. You cannot start later, okay? If you start earlier in phase 0, you just slow down yourself. And you are not sure even at the beginning where you are right or not. So you usually start with the regulation in phase 1. And this is quite, you know, complex phase. It involves finding additional financial support. And this financial support, of course, usually comes from private investors that they know the market. They are convinced that you really got an interesting idea and a feasible product or solution. And most importantly, you have the right people, okay? So this is very important. At this stage, you don't have yet something to sell. You sell yourself the idea and your understanding of the market and of the solution, okay? And then you have to set up all the quality management system at this stage, and you start slowing down all of the steps because you have to follow regulations. I think I don't want to go to the details, but let me emphasize that it is on phase 1. So when you start doing this, and maybe even before you go to the investors, that you have to ask yourself, do I have the right people to address all the risks? And the most frequent situation, if you are not a large corporate, is that you have the people who have the idea. They know what niche they want or what problem they want to address. They know how they would like to address it, but they lack all of the auxiliary information in technology, for example, in quality management, in whatever activity that is necessary to get there. So then you have to decide, how do I find the right people? Okay. And of course, this is a question that Igor will probably explain you much better, but let me anticipate. You need to have your core team covering all essential parts. And then you have to consider reducing risk by finding partners that can complement your know-how and buy a part of risk. So essentially, when you work together with partners, maybe you pay them, right? But you don't only buy a result of their work. You also sell your risk. And this is really, really important. So you have to be careful and find trusted partners. And here I give back the microphone to Igor.
Thank you, Diego. I hope you can hear me. Just a moment. Okay, I think that was a good overview of how we approach various phases in the development of medical device. But now I would like to move on, even though the topic can be expanded a little bit further, a lot further on the. I will just a moment, please. I just noticed that I'm running down on power, and I will plug myself in.
Okay, while we wait for you, maybe I add 2 more words on the previous situation. So don't remember that phase 1 is when you do the R&D, and then phase 2 is when you want to go and get a certification. Only in phase 3 you can start selling. So you have to keep in mind that the investment needed upfront is significant.
Thank you, Diego. I'm back on track now and plugged in. So, okay, so let's move on and see what does it take really for a startup to be effective in the game of medical devices. I would like to really emphasize here the range of skills and competencies that a medical device would want to would require. As Diego already mentioned, there are, let's say, 4 areas of competencies and skills that a business in medical devices would definitely need to master, and I can split them between business, of course, clinical, which is the market, technology, which is the basis for the device, and regulatory. And if we look at just to give you some examples of what falls under each of those items, everybody who has run its own business will know that just running a startup, just doing the business element of the business is a mammoth task. Just to, managing your cash flow, getting your funding, doing the sales, managing your distribution side of the business, management of your workforce, organizational matters, HR, admin. These are all tasks that dominate a startup. I'm sure you will know that from your experience. And for a medical device, startups or businesses, of course, the clinical aspect of their venture is equally important. The clinical side of the skills will relate to really understanding what is the need in the healthcare for your device, and what really how the device really answers those needs. Is it safe? Is it functional? Does it perform well? Can be supported? Can be distributed? Is it usable? Is it easy to use? So these are very key questions that I personally cannot understand the business could do without. Really, these are two areas that are essential. Further, the technical aspects of the technology or the engineering side of a medical device naturally is very important. One has to decide, do I develop the device myself, or do I outsource that part? Do I manufacture the device myself, or do I outsource that one? But what you really don't want to outsource, or you want to keep to yourself, is your IP. If you have spent 3, 5, 10 years to develop your device, of course you need to protect your IP so that you can reap the benefits as you commercialize and you scale up. So that's maybe one of the areas that really is essential. Of course, you cannot forget about the regulatory part. But here the regulatory part, like Diego has already explained, is actually very important. It links very much with the technology part, because the way the regulation ensures the safety of device, it is by ensuring that the technology or the device was developed within a framework that ensures consistent checks on risks and mitigation of those. So the technology and the regulatory aspects are pretty much linked together. And for example, for business to really master the two of them, which is essential, they will need to decide, can I actually master the technology, and do I have the engineers who will be able to develop that technology and bring it to market within the regulatory framework? These are two separate skills. And when for example, our customers, when they go to market and look for engineers, they shouldn't really be, or they don't normally look just for engineers to be able to develop the technologies. They have to be looking for medical engineers who have medical experience, engineers who have experience in conducting their engineering within the regulatory framework. If you just go back to the slide that Diego has shown with the pile of the paperwork, an example on medical device software development, we were looking back and we were trying to see how much code writing there really is in developing a medical software. And we realized it's probably less than a quarter, maybe less than a fifth of all our time is used for code writing. The rest is working with the client, and most of it is writing down the process, writing down the development work, writing down how we have developed the device, how we have tested it for its safety, and how we have complied with the regulatory framework. And this is why we essentially have the quality management system. So it's a quick key question for the management of a medical device company to ask themselves, can I actually find this type of engineering skill on the market? How quickly can I employ them? How quickly can I train them to work in a team to deliver the engineering part of the device effectively? And then by the time they finish and they conducted their business, they will ask themselves, oh, what do you do with those engineers? And at that stage, most likely the answer is yes, they will probably be redundant after that year 2, 3, 4 of their work with the company. So on that stage, I would like to move on and just try to explore what are the, let's say, the key success factors in defining the strategy, the business strategy of a medical device company. I would first like to ask a question. Why are really the startups the innovators in this industry? I would say it's not because they are more innovative. I would rather say because they are more better organized and better focused to deliver the innovation to the market. We all know small companies can be focused. They have a very clear aim. They have entrepreneurial spirit and a lot of motivation to succeed, which you would normally not find in large corporations. They have agile business to the approach. They are small teams and focused. And they, of course, don't have the old established processes that are typical for large organizations. Startups, medical device startups, would normally organize themselves in such a way to be the most efficient in their path to commercialization, in their path to development. So I think the focus is probably the key ingredients of success. So, and what they should be focused on, like with every business, they have to be focused on their customer. They have to be focused, they have to maintain their focus on clinical benefits, and they have to be focused on their path to commercialization. This is pretty much the essence of their focus. For that matter, they have to look to reduce complexity and remain agile. They of course want to retain the core skills and core activities within in-house, but at the same time, they better outsource non-core activities so that they don't distract their focus on the path to commercialization. I would like to return back to this slide of core skills and competencies. And if we look at the clinical and the business, they're pretty much essential. And I don't see a business that would be successful in outsourcing their management or their care for their clients. So I think it's pretty clear that business and clinical skills are the paramount of their engagement. If we look back and we look at the startups that we're working with, we will see the successful startups in medical device business usually started by clinical entrepreneurs such as medical doctors who have, let's say, invented a new method, a new device, a new therapy, and then they try to bring it, they try to commercialize this. These type of medically focused founders would normally show some kind of entrepreneurial ambitions. We also see startups that would be founded by technology-driven management, but to be successful, they quickly realize that first of all, they need business skills. They need to have this entrepreneurial spirit. And they also quickly realize that they will not be able to enter the market without understanding the clinical aspects for their device. So this maybe summarizes where I believe the key success factors for medical device companies are. So if we can just summarize them, a successful medical device company will have strong links to the clinical community. They would choose an influential clinical collaborator, unless they are themselves one of them, or somebody from their peers. And that collaborator, that clinical doctor, for example, would use their novel device, would prove its use, would prove its benefits, would publish articles about them, and with that also create a hype within his peer network. So the focus on clinical benefits and patient outcomes comes first. Of course, it doesn't go without business. A lot of startups, at least at the beginning of their projects, would forget about how important, or they would not know how important the management team is, how important the business aspects of how important their ambitions, aims, and objectives are. We all know that VCs don't really invest in devices. They invest in the management team. This is by far the most important investment criteria of any VC fund. And the management team in this medical or clinical fields would normally, it's quite common that they would have extended their management with a kind of non-executive boards or advisors that would typically have clinical heritage, clinical understanding. They would maybe have in-depth technical understanding, and above all, they would have a very strong clinical network, which of course is essential for commercialization. The management will also need to be very focused on choosing and selecting the right business model. Matteo was already mentioning or talking about plenty different stakeholders in the healthcare industry, and the questions of who is the buyer, who makes the buying decision, who pays for the device, are key questions that have to be properly addressed in the business model, in the business plan. Are we selling to hospitals? Are we selling to private doctors or clinics, or are we selling directly to patients? These are essential answers that one will have to have. And of course, that business model has to be written down in a comprehensive business plan. We shouldn't really forget about protection of IP, which again is essential as a kind of a business element of every medical device startup. So what do we do about the technology and regulatory matters? Now, for a startup that has relatively small team, I think it is important to focus on the two, the business and clinical. And then depending on how much skills and how complex their device is, they have to decide whether we do technology in-house or we outsource it. They will need to understand the regulatory environment well enough to make an informative decision. Is it worth us building the team that will cover technology and regulatory matters effectively, or is it maybe just better to fill our skill gaps and find engineering partners who have done medical devices before, who have understands the regulatory framework, and whose engineers can follow the processes that are compliant within the regulatory framework. So we see a lot of startups engaging us at the phase zero. If you remember the last slide that Diego was brought up during his presentation, the phase zero is the phase where the proof of concept for their device is made. And at that stage, once the concept is proven, the medical device startup has to prepare itself for this phase one, which is the lengthy part, usually the lengthy part of the development phase. This is the phase where they will need to develop their device from scratch, from the beginning, and within the regulatory environment. So they will start with the requirements. The requirements will set the scene from the very beginning and will allow the engineering team to go through the validation and verification process to the final product design. At that stage, the medical device startup will need to ask themselves, do we want to develop this competence from scratch only to get rid of it later? save some cost potentially? Or shall we employ an experienced company with a big pool of engineers who can pick and choose the right sort of technological or technical competence, bring the good team together, and follow the regulatory part of the development in an efficient manner? So we see companies many times engaging us on this early stage just before they go into the Series A funding round, and ask us to set out the development plan, cost out the development process, set the right milestones, and estimate how long this will take. Once this can be quite a lengthy process. It may be costly for a small startups, but it normally pays off. What the startups normally do at that stage, they effectively pick up our experience, they use our credibility and slot it into their business plan. It is with that credibility that they can go to the VC fund and ask for funds. And this is normally a missing bit where we could really help medical device companies improve their chances of getting the real money. That's the private money, the VC fund money in the Series A fund. So hopefully I have given you a good overview of how we do business with our customers. And of course, I'm sure that there may be questions in the audience, and Diego and I will be happy to oblige. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Igor. Diego, for me, for sure, your presentation is an eye-opener. We will give the floor to the audience as well now for the questions, but also I have a question for you. During your presentation, I have to admit, we had a really dynamic debate here, and I think you observe it. So I'm curious, when you decide and actively invest your time to support a medtech company or startup, how long actually does it take to enter the market with you, with your support? How much you are able to shorten the process, and for how long?
Okay, there's no one answer here. The answer really depends on the type of medical device, and as I explained very early on, there's really a wide range of different medical devices, active, passive, complex, and so on. The development times will very much depend on the complexity of the device, and above all on the device classification. Class 3 type medical devices are kind of the high risk devices, and they will fall onto a much stricter regulatory framework. So if you say you develop a device within a 3-year period, you should, which is a kind of medium complexity device, you would then require at least a year from your submission of your documentation to go through the regulatory approval process. But that is at least. If you have any problems on that path, or you've chosen a wrong path, this may double very quickly. But if you're, for example, bringing up a novel medical device, that means completely new device where you can't relate to an existing type of device, this certification period may be a lot longer.
Maybe I can add one detail. So usually it's not driven by technology. Okay, so there are two things that are giving the pace of the progress. One is clinical trials. So you usually have to do at least one clinical trial to find the final data that allow you to set up your device and configure it in the final version, and then another clinical trial with the final version in which you validate the approach and you show that with this particular configuration and setup, you are safe and you achieve your goal. If during the second clinical trial you find something to be changed, well, then you have to do another clinical trial, okay? So in our experience in COSILAB is the following. If you have a complex engineering task, we can squeeze into it more engineers, but we cannot make it faster to collect data with patients, so the clinical trials. And don't forget, once we are done and we submit the documentation, there is 1 year waiting, just to know about the decision.
Thank you, Diego. At this point, I would like to invite all the English-speaking audience or participants, please raise a question. If you have one, just please just drop a short comment to the chat section, so I can give you a word, a floor. Because otherwise, I would like to thank you all English-speaking participants. We are thrilled that so many of you joined us this time. We are moving further to the closing part of the webinar, and we will continue in Slovene language. So, however, if there are no further questions, we are anyway looking forward to remain in contact with all of you from other regions, and thank you for joining us. Torej, pred nami je še sklep. Yes.
Thank you.
So yes, Diego, thank you very much. And okay. Please, Beata, you have a mic on. Agama. Beata. Yes. Beata, do you hear us?
If I may also, just hi to Ion George from Romania, who just joined us in this minute. Hi, Ion. Why I mentioned Ion? So if anybody will be interested in really good experience in EIT Health, so our partners here, and the Romanian market, Ion is my basically contact in Romania. You know that I personally am active in the European Connected Health Alliance network, the partner of HealthDay. So Ion, sorry to tell you that we are now stopping with the English section, but I do invite you to watch the recording. Hi Ion, hi.
Don't worry,
thank you for joining. I think it was a fantastic content. I'm super happy that we have this type of company now in Slovenia. And I'm really grateful both to Igor and Diego for doing this. And of course, Mateja, who was our basically trailblazer a year ago, setting the stage for the logic of how all of this has to be done.